Down for the Count by Ted Wenskus. Read by Ted. Ferd trudged up to the immense wooden doors of the decaying castle, pounded loudly, and waited for a response. The journey to his new client's abode had not gone well. The throng of superstitious natives who forced religious paraphernalia, garlands of garlic, and wooden stakes into his possession, he could handle. Foreign people were like that. Some gave you necklaces of flowers, others gave you wooden mallets with the words "Vampire Killer" carved on them. No problem there. The series of hairpin turns that his driver put him through could have been a more pleasurable experience, but he'd ridden through London at rush hour before, so he took that in stride as well. But for him and his luggage to be booted out of the carriage in the pouring rain a good 100 yards from the castle's main doors was the last straw. If that driver has a license, I want it revoked, Ferd stewed, thrusting his hands into his pockets and jumping up and down for warmth. Surely this Count guy has more than one serf to replace him. Ferd shivered and jumped some more. And more than one doorman, for God's sake. He pounded on the dark, wet wood much harder. The sound of a bolt being thrown answered Ferd's persistence. With an age-worn creak, the door slowly opened, and Ferd quickly stepped inside. "It's about bloody time," he started. But upon realizing that there was no one present to berate, he simply snorted to himself. Ferd shook the chill from his limbs and inspected his surroundings. Thick layers of dust and cobwebs covered the hall's expansive stone floor. Large, torn tapestries, some green with mildew, shrouded numerous pieces of furniture around the chamber. A dank, moldering odor prevailed in the stale air, accented only by the faint oily tinge of black smoke rising from scattered clusters of lit candelabra. Ferd shook his head. You just couldn't find a good peasant for upkeep these days. A slow, graceful movement caught Ferd's attention, and he turned to find a regal-looking gentleman regarding him with wide, lupin eyes.
"Good evening,"
the aristocratic figure intoned.
"I am the Count."
The man arched his thick eyebrows in time with his announcement.
"Welcome, and enter of your own free will."
As if the alternative had any appeal, Ferd thought as he outstretched his hand and shook the Count's. "Ferd Liftpick, lawyer extraordinaire, at your service, Mr. Count."
"Ah,"
the Count returned.
"Mr. Renfield's colleague. I am so sorry to see that he could not make this final journey. I trust he is well?"
"Actually, he's turned into a drooling, raving psychotic with an appetite for bugs, Your Countess. I'd told him to watch out for the local cuisine on his last trip, but, well, that's why he was only a junior associate."
"That is unfortunate."
"That's one way of putting it, I suppose," Ferd said, breathing on his hands and rubbing them together. "Regardless, I think we can finalize your real estate purchases today. And may I add on a personal note that we, the solicitors of Smith, Corgi, and Liftpick, truly appreciate your fine taste in architecture and antiquity. I sincerely believe that, in lieu of your current housing, you will feel quite at home at every charnel house, abandoned manor, that you have chosen." A serpentine grin slithered onto the Count's face.
"I find great comfort in your assurances, Mr. Liftpick. I will sign now any papers that are needed."
Ferd hefted his shoulder bag onto a nearby table and began rifling through its contents. "Just out of curiosity," he said after a moment, "what do you plan to do with these properties? Is this part of an investment scheme by some chance?"
"I intend to renovate the properties and sell them at a future date for profit,"
the Count said without hesitation.
"Your esteemed country has many amenities that my land lacks."
"The child labor itself makes it worth the move," Ferd nodded. "But if you're really keen on fine property," Ferd glanced briefly from side to side before continuing in a hushed voice, "I've got a bridge you might be interested in."
"Thank you. No, that is quite all right."
How about some swampland, then? Comes complete with a wide variety of bogs, a lifetime supply of peat moss, and a large spectral dog that runs around on the occasional rampage. It's very in vogue, and the people of Devonshire would just love a new face in the area.
No, I am quite pleased with my own choices.
All right, I've got one last special item that you can't possibly refuse. The Count sighed.
And what might that be?
Canterbury Cathedral. The Count drew back and hissed. Oh, come on, it's not that bad. Admittedly, it's not easy to heat, and they're running out of flagstones to bury archbishops under. But other than that... The Count smoothed his flowing black cape as he regained his composure.
I apologize,
he said, his voice like quicksilver.
Religion and I do not agree.
I have the same problem with curry, so I know exactly how you feel. Oh, speaking of food, Ferd produced a small bulbous vegetable from his coat pocket. You wouldn't happen to like garlic by any chance, would you? The Count retreated and covered his mouth and nose with a pale hand.
Put it away!
His muffled voice commanded. Ferd looked perplexedly at the vegetable, and then at the Count. No religion, no garlic. Say, you wouldn't happen to be a... No, never mind. Just thought I'd offer you some, since I'm starved. He bit into the white clove and munched contentedly. The Count's skin took a faint green tinge. So what's the deal? You have some sort of allergy to garlic or something?
My sense of smell is rather sensitive,
the Count explained.
I was, gassed in the war.
Ferd blinked. What, with garlic? The Count fidgeted.
The enemy was still working on the mustard derivative at the time.
And just what war was this?
It was the Crimean War, of course.
I see, Ferd said calmly. Yep, that confirms it. Another insane aristocrat. He ran his hand through his beard. Better step up the pace a bit. Without ceremony, Ferd emptied the contents of his shoulder bag onto the table and squared the predominantly white, pink, and yellow stack with his hands. Well, here are all the papers you need to sign your countship. If you have any questions, I'll be staying at the local Food and Fool Tavern for a couple more days, after which you can reach me at my London office. The Count looked up from the legal forms just as a peal of thunder shook the castle walls.
Surely you cannot be thinking of departure so soon after your arrival,
the Count purred. Oh, I assure you I can, Ferd said. The legal world, as they say, waits for no mortal.
How very interesting,
the Count considered with another raised eyebrow.
Especially since you will have to delay your return. The storm, the Count gestured a hand toward a small window which immediately displayed a lightning-flecked tempest, I fear, has washed out the bridge.
Oh, Ferd said. Well, I suppose taking the back road will make the trip a bit longer, but no matter, I guess.
Ah, surely you are mistaken, the Count said, shuffling a bit. There is only one way to and from my humble abode.
No, I saw one from the coach on the way up. Leads right to the back of the castle, I'm sure, Ferd said. You know, the one lined with the skulls.
That road.
The Count slapped his forehead with the palm of his hand.
Of course. It is not safe.
The Count shook his head.
Nope, not safe at all.
Not safe?
Horribly, dreadfully unsafe. It is very prone to sudden rock slides, in fact.
The Count closed his eyes tightly for a second, placed a cupped hand to his vaguely pointed ear, and smiled when he heard a deep rumbling through the torrents of rain.
I think I hear one now that is undoubtedly blocking any means down.
Ferd tapped his foot for a moment. And this bridge of yours is washed out?
Yes.
And you're sure you wouldn't like to buy a new one?
No,
the Count snapped. No, you're not sure, or no, you don't want one? The Count's face tightened.
I will attend to both matters myself, Mr. Liftpick.
I see. So you're going to go out and build one. Ferd nonchalantly pawed through some of his forms. Did you know that I handle insurance coverage as well? The Count bit his lip in a manner that should have drawn blood.
Why don't you try to get some rest? You have had a long journey.
Ferd exhaled wearily. Probably not a bad idea. I'm not much of a night person myself. But that shouldn't matter too much. You'll most likely be signing forms till sunrise anyway, so I can see you then. The Count shifted uneasily, but then produced a quill from the recesses of his dark cape.
You are welcome to stay in any of the rooms on the west side of the castle. Be sure that when I am finished, I shall attend to you immediately, Mr. Liftpick.
You are too kind, your Countessity, Ferd replied, picking up his shoulder bag. Hope my stay here won't prove to be too much of an inconvenience.
Believe me, the Count darkly intoned, it won't.
Ferd tenaciously tested yet another door on the east side of the castle. As with the other dozen or so he'd tried, this one also seemed to be bolted from the inside. Leave it to the peons to bungle something as simple as closing a door, Ferd mentally muttered. Probably their own quarters anyway. That's it. Must be why this section looks like it has been cleaned in the past few centuries. Not that the west side of the castle had been any better. Nearly every room he had opened sent various specimens of the animal kingdom fleeing from his scrutiny. All save the rats, which merely twitched their whiskers at him and then resumed gnawing on the banisters. The remaining rooms were filled with fallen masonry, which, although picturesque in a Gothic sense, still looked none too comfortable to sleep on. Acceptable quarters, Ferd reasoned, were definitely to be found elsewhere. Ferd yanked at another door and felt it shift slightly. After glancing from side to side, he grabbed the large iron handle with both hands and pulled hard. With a grinding of stressed metal, the handle popped off and sent Ferd stumbling backward. He regained his balance, leaned against the wall, and stared at the still-closed door. It was going to take all night. He knew it. He was going to have to conclude a major real estate deal without any sleep. Just great. Ferd kicked the loose handle in frustration. The handle skittered across the hallway and ricocheted off the door, which, as if on its own volition, glided open, shedding darkness into the already dimly lit corridor. Ferd was still frowning over the logistics behind this luminary feat when a gentle caress teased the end of his beard. He blinked and moved a hand to his beard, expecting to find a bat or similar rodent caught in it. As he did so, he felt an icy finger trace its way down the back of his neck. Ferd turned. "Hello?" The wall in front of him refused comment. Ferd scanned the wall in search of any stray, icy fingers that just might happen to be hanging around, when he felt a distinctly palm-shaped pat on his posterior. Ferd spun sharply. "We're skirting awfully close to a harassment case here," he warned. An icy-looking finger appeared in the darkened doorway and coquettishly beckoned Ferd. "Persistent, aren't you?" Ferd said as he advanced toward the digit. The finger had already vanished when Ferd entered the room. The dim chamber looked as if it had, at one time, been the quarters of a lady of nobility. A shattered mirror hung over a carved bureau, its shards now intermingled with dusty perfume bottles on the bureau's surface. A large, canopied bed was positioned squarely in the middle of the room, with a number of deteriorated gowns spread across it. Ferd scanned for the elusive finger, and, failing to find it, sauntered around the room. Unlike all the other chambers he'd examined, this one bore absolutely no sign of life. Even the spiders hung dead in their webs. He had expected to at least see footprints in the dust from whomever had taken interest in him, but the floor remained undisturbed. He wandered over to the bed and casually brushed some grit off of one of the gowns. As if in response, A pale feminine hand materialized within the gown's sleeve and stroked the length of Ferd's forearm. "Oh my," said Ferd, as he watched the rest of the woman appear. "Did they always make corsets that tight?" The woman stretched languidly, smiled, and ran her hands through her long, raven-black hair. "I like men with beards," she cooed. "So do I," said Ferd, nodding quickly. "That's why I'm one of them. Lucky me, huh?" "You have no idea," the woman replied, tapping experimentally at the soft venous bulges on each side of Ferd's throat. Ferd swallowed. "Can I ask you something?" The woman returned. "Was it me, or did you just appear out of thin air?" "Trick of the light, Honeybeard," she said, playfully petting his sideburns. Ferd nodded. "Thought so." As he sat on the bed, Ferd felt a set of hands begin to slowly rub his shoulders. He turned his head and found a buxom, blonde-haired woman gazing down at him with brown, liquid eyes. "Hello," said Ferd. "Are you two together?" "You're just too cute," the blonde woman responded. "Could you tilt your head just a bit to the left?" the first woman asked. "Yes, just like that." Ferd felt his knotted muscles unwind from the massage. It was probably a full minute or so before he noticed that one of his boots had been removed and that a brown-haired woman was kneading his foot. "Oh, 3 is just too many," he said. "Shush," said the foot rubber, winking. "We don't want your blood pressure too high." Ferd anxiously drummed his fingers on his chest. "Anything I can do to help?" "Oh, no," the first woman purred, now snuggling closer. Ferd could now distinctly feel the impression of each corset string against his chest, and the soft touch of her hair against his neck. Ferd looked into the woman's face. "Can you breathe at all in that thing?" he asked, nodding to the gown. "You know, it's so tight, I can't even feel you inhale." The woman opened her mouth to respond, but suddenly she spun her head away. "What?" she gasped. "Have you been eating?" Ferd wilted. "I had some garlic a little while ago." The women scurried off the bed, the first one clutching her mouth and stomach. "I've never been so repulsed in all my lives." "You've spoiled everything," said the foot rubber, a pout on her lip. "Now what'll we do?" "I guess it'll be more gypsies tonight," the blonde woman sighed. She then turned to Ferd. "Do you mind? You're stinking up the room." "I was just, that is," Ferd managed. "I can drink some peppermint extract or something if my breath's that bad." "Beat it, Fuzzface," the first woman snapped, and Ferd suddenly felt himself being propelled into the hallway. He slapped into the wall at the same time the door slammed shut. Only the briefest of moments passed before the door opened again and ejected his boot in a similar trajectory. Ferd massaged the hand that had absorbed his impact and stared once more at the closed door. "And people wonder why I'm cranky," he muttered. Ferd heard the wailing cry just as he returned to the west side of the castle, having abandoned his quest for decent sleeping quarters in the east wing. He angled towards a small stone window and peered out. An older woman, dressed in the multicolored attire representative of the indigenous gypsies, stood alone in the courtyard. "Monster!" the woman cried, wiping strands of wet hair from her face. "What have you done with them?" "Hello?" Ferd called down. "Can I help you?" "Why are you still robbing our village?" the gypsy woman wailed. "Have we not done all that you ask?" Ferd paused. "You wouldn't happen to be part of the cleaning staff, would you?" "We cleared the mountain road for you, and you reward us by taking our menfolk."
Well, if you did as good of a job out there as you did in here, I can see why, Ferd returned. Please, the woman pleaded, let them return safely. Well, I'll pass your message on to the Count, but it's going to be his call, Ferd called back. If these men of yours are actual janitorial staff, I'd say chances are they're going to be gone for quite some time. You are not the Count? The woman outstretched her hands. Who are you? Are you one of his prisoners? I'm his lawyer, actually, Ferd said, somewhat proud. The woman put her hands to her head, screamed, and ran into the night. The evil has redoubled! Ferd watched her disappear and drummed his fingers on the windowsill. I hate people, he thought. He found the Count still hunched over the table. The papers in front of him were now stacked in a variety of smaller piles instead of one larger one. Ah, Mr. Liftpick, the Count lilted, looking up. You are still awake? Your Countship, Wait, don't fill that one out in ink. Ferd fumbled around in his shoulder bag and tossed an off-yellow pencil onto the table. The Count picked it up and began slowly rolling it between his fingers. You've, saying? I was saying, Sir Count, that avalanche, washed-out bridge or not, I wish to return to the village tonight. The Count's eyebrows knitted together. My humble abode is not to your liking? A crash of thunder shook the castle, cascading a cloud of dust and loose masonry into the hall. Ferd waved through the cloud until he could see the Count again, who had lifted the paper he'd been filling out and brushed a pile of grit from it. Just for the sake of argument, Ferd said, let's say no. The Count tapped his chin. This wouldn't happen to have anything to do with 3 women on the east side of the castle, would it? Nope, Ferd said. So you did not see them this evening, yes? Yes, that is no. See who again? My wives, the Count answered plainly, gesturing with an envelope containing the England-bound steamer tickets that Ferd had purchased prior to his visit. They do not know that I am leaving. Ah, said Ferd. Did you know that I handle domestic cases as well? Leaving where? Asked a female voice. Both Ferd and the Count spun, and regarded the 3 women who now leaned against one of the less dusty pillars of the hall. I see the human garlic press has made his way down here, the black-haired woman noted. Oh, those 3 women, Ferd said. The Count's face grew dark. You do me a dishonor with your untruth, he said to Ferd. Speaking of which, the Count's blonde wife interjected, you still haven't answered us about this leaving of yours. It is of no concern, the Count said, turning. A small matter. What, with that much paperwork? You would be surprised, the Count said, regarding Ferd again. Hey, Ferd said, if you want fix-em-up West European properties, you have to go through the proper channels, including, in this case, the English one. Ferd tapered into a cough and then into nothing. England? The women said in unison. The Count bent his head and covered his eyes. Yes. You're not buying new property in a new country and having it still look like this ruin, are you? This from the Count's brown-haired wife. We need our solitude, the Count said curtly. So we have to live in cemeteries or abandoned abbeys in order to get that? Brown-haired wife shifted. What's wrong with Hampstead? Oh, I can help you there, Ferd chimed in. Silence! The Count roared. You! He pointed at his wives. Are not coming, and you! He pointed at Ferd. Dispense with this needless paperwork at once! Ferd opened his mouth to say something, but promptly closed it upon seeing the bale in the Count's countenance. He shuffled over to the piles of paperwork and started flipping through them.
This may take a minute or two. What do you mean we're not coming? Blonde-haired wife demanded.
I forbid it,
the Count intoned. Forbid this, the Count's black-haired wife gestured. We've been stuck in this place for centuries without so much as an evening out in Bucharest, and now you're moving to an upscale country and leaving us here to tend the rubble?
I will send for you later,
the Count said, unconvincingly. Centuries? Ferd pulled a single form from a medium-sized stack, grabbed the pencil from the table, and held both out to the Count.
You absolutely have to fill this one out.
The Count covered the distance to Ferd in a blink.
You are the solicitor. You fill it out.
Well, I'll have to ask you some questions, Ferd started. And now you're just trying to change the subject, blonde-haired wife accused the Count. The Count flashed over to her.
You will not speak to me in that tone.
Could I have your social security number? Ferd asked.
I do not have one,
the Count barked, and then to his wife.
You will do well to remember your place here.
What do you mean you don't have one? Ferd said.
I mean what I say.
To his wife.
I should have left you ages ago.
He gestured to his other two wives.
All of you!
Now that would be a welcome change, brown-haired wife challenged. Everybody's got a social security number, Ferd maintained. Do you have something official like a tax return that I could look at?
No, I do not,
the Count thundered, then pivoted again.
I have lost all patience with you,
he said, pointing at the three women.
You shall be driven from this land never to return.
Oh, scare me, quipped his black-haired wife. I know, said Ferd, pointing the pencil at the Count. How about a marriage license? Ferd almost didn't even see the Count move this time, so impossibly fast he was. Suddenly, he was just there, in front of him, with the pencil that Ferd had pointed with planted firmly in his chest. Oh, Ferd said. Now, see what happens when you rush the legal process? The Count's face twisted into a silent scream as he crumpled to the floor. As Ferd watched, the Count's skin tightened, eroded, and flaked onto the gray flagstones. In seconds, all that remained was a body-shaped pile of dust, with a half-buried pencil in what used to be the Count's chest area. A moment passed before Ferd spoke. Oh, I get it. He was a vampire, right? The three women blinked. Ferd raised a finger. That wouldn't happen to make you, by any chance, that is... The women looked to one another and then to Ferd, each with a surprised look much like that of a cat that had been suddenly, unexpectedly caught tormenting a small animal. And at Ferd's direct address, they each covered their noses and mouths. Ferd paused again and picked up the reservations for the England-bound cargo ship. He looked at the Count's widows, and then, much like a cat himself, a smile crept onto his face. The man held the front of his coat closed with one hand and waved wisps of fog away with the other. Across the street, a single gas lamp lit the narrow London alley. This had better be good, the man said. The best? Ferd replied. The man scowled, but then lifted the sheet, and his eyes roved for a moment before he spoke. I'll give you 300 for them. That's a little low, Doctor, Ferd said. I defy you to find even a mark on them. The man continued to peer. 500. For all 3 bodies? All right, 6, but no more, I tell you. The man dropped the sheet. Ferd considered. Agreed. The man grimaced as he counted out banknotes into Ferd's hand. Good specimens are hard to come by, the man said, begrudging. Especially female ones. As well I know. The wad of money disappeared into Ferd's overcoat. It was no mean feat coming up with these three on such short notice. Demand has been high. The man grunted. I would have taken Dr. Chutney's if the three he hadn't disappeared after the inquest. He smirked. It wasn't as if he was going to need them 6 feet under Highgate sod. Indeed, said Ferd. The man peeked under the sheet once more and stared at the pale faces of the 3 women. Still, it'll be good to have an ample supply of material for my work. My assistant is rather clumsy.
Yes, master,
A short, hunched figure agreed.
very clumsy.
The man patted the short figure placidly on the head. Get the horses ready, Humphrey. As the little man lurched forward toward the front of the wagon, Ferd ambled to the man's side and nonchalantly brushed some dust from the corner of the cadaver sheet. I hope everything will be to your satisfaction, he said. The man dropped the sheet and latched the wagon door. This meeting never happened. And for God's sake, do something about your breath. Ferd nodded and watched the man clamber into the open-aired wagon seat. Once situated, the man took the reins offered by his companion and glanced dismissively down at Ferd. I think that will be all, he said. You took the words right out of my mouth, said Ferd, as he watched the 3 bodies under the sheet slowly shift and rise as the wagon clattered forward, disappearing into the London fog.